Oh, good evening, ladies. I'm pleased to see you both. It's always a pleasure to see women in our community. So, I want to introduce Patricia. She has a huge experience in browser development. During her career, she participated in development of Opera and Vivaldi. But the broader introduction for her will present well-known in Russia CPP community Anastasia Kozakova from JetBrains, who will be our expert for this talk. Anastasia specializes in network communication and took part in Yota's 4G network kickoff. She is now participates in creation of tools to make software development more comfortable and easy. So, please, Anastasia, introduce Patricia.
Yeah, hello everyone. Good evening, the Russian community. So I'm really happy to see Patricia here. I think it's her first time when she's presenting at C++ Russia. And I'm really welcoming you, Patricia, here. This online conference. I know Patricia as an international speaker who has spoken at such conferences as CPPCon, ACCU, C++ and C, NDC, and many others on subjects ranging from sandboxing in Chromium to vulnerabilities in C++. And she has taught a range of subjects in computer science at the University of Oslo. And she's also involved in the Hash Include organization, hoping to improve diversity and inclusion in the C++ community. And before we start, I wanted just to briefly ask you, Patricia, so you have talks on secure programming practices in C++, software vulnerabilities, and actually my favorite one from ACCU, the anatomy of exploit. So it seems the security topics are of high importance to you. So where does that interest actually came from? So is it somehow connected to your work on various browsers, or like what's the reason?
Yes, I think it's very much connected, although I didn't really realize that at the beginning. My first real job after university was at Opera Software making the Opera browser. So that was back in 2005. So, and one of the things that probably set my career apart is that is where I kind of learned how to do software development. And I was working in a browser, and a browser has traditionally been a target for attackers. And so all the way from the beginning, I was used to working in an environment where we would get vulnerability reports, where we would try to reproduce, where we would be handling disclosure, where we would do security updates. Things like that was normal to me from the beginning, and something that I thought was the case everywhere, that everyone worked like that. Of course, when I left Opera, I realized that that was not the case for most of the industry.
Yeah, thanks. Like, not getting into much details with these vulnerability topics, but still, I would like to ask you kind of a little bit provocative questions. So, do you consider C++ a risky language in terms of vulnerabilities? Do you think it's like easy to get vulnerable code in C++?
It's hard. In some ways. I mean, the thing is, and this is something that I've said before as well. I consider C++ to be a scalpel, and you want your surgeon to use the scalpel, but it doesn't mean that you want your 3-year-old running around with the scalpel. So a scalpel isn't bad in itself, and I feel that's the case for C++ as well. There are many ways to use C++ safely. Unfortunately, there are also many ways to use it in dangerous ways, and luckily now we have more tooling to be able to catch a lot of that.
Yeah, not to mention core guidelines for that. And
yes.
Yeah, hopefully that helps. Yeah, indeed.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Before we start coding a browser with you, just a question. How many you've actually made before now?
What do you mean?
Browsers.
How many browsers have you made by now? I know you've made many.
I guess this could be number 5.
Okay.
Sort of.
Impressive.
That's good.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think with that we can start.
So yeah, let's start the presentation then.
Okay, so let's get started. The thing is, I tweeted this out in February. I know it's crazy, but I want to make a browser. So this is February this year, February 23rd. I was just going off to Germany to do training on secure coding in C++. And the thing is, this kind of hits me every few months, this internal desire. The thing is, I've probably had it since I graduated, actually. I used Opera at university in the early 2000s, and I really loved it. And that was like my dream job. I was going to go and work at Opera. And so that was also the first place I applied. And I was like super, super stoked to be able to go and work on my browser, the one that I use normally. And so that's what I did in 2005. So the thing is, I've kind of had this in me all along, but it kind of just, I had this spur feeling in February. The thing is, I have no money, or, well, okay, I have no money for this, because making your browser is actually really expensive, because you need to pay a lot of engineers to be able to produce something that is of sufficient quality that people can use it. So let's look at a little bit of what it's going to cost. Like, you have the obvious thing, you need to develop your browser, and that's going to cost money because you have to pay people, right? You need maintenance. Like, a lot of people, this is the bit that a lot of people forget, is that when you make a browser, it's never done. You have to do continuous releasing around every month for the entire lifetime of the browser. And this means that you have to have maintenance. You have to maybe make new features. You might have to refresh the UI, change things, fix bugs, blah, blah, blah. So you need maintenance cost as well. Then, of course, any kind of a backend system that you're using, you will also need hosting for that. And that is also going to cost money. So it costs money, right? Like everything else. But what is the business model of browsers, really? Because this is something that people don't really think about much, or sometimes they think about it and they go like, it's magic, I don't know. Because how do you make money off of something that you give away for free? When I started Opera in 2005, they told me that they had like a massive secret and I couldn't tell it to anyone. And I was like, okay, so what is it? And they're like, yeah, we have to keep the secret until tomorrow at 9 o'clock. And I'm like, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I think I'm good. And then they said, yeah, tomorrow we're going free. And that was the thing. Opera cost money in the early 2000s. You had license fees for Opera. And then in 2005, the fall of 2005, Opera became free. And that is the case for all browsers today. They're all free. So how are you going to make your money? Almost every browser on Earth makes money through Google search. So Google is funding all of the major browsers today. And this happened way before even Google made their own browser. So way back before Chrome ever was a thought, Google was paying for browsers. And Google is still paying for browsers. And we're talking in the order of hundreds of millions of dollars. So Google is really investing in browsers, open source browsers as well. So if you think about like Firefox gets its biggest chunk of change from Google. If you're lucky, you might get around $1 per user per year, which means that your paycheck from Google is going to scale with your number of users. But it also means, you think, oh, $1 per user is not that much. But the thing is that the browser market is very big. So if you think about just how many browsers you use personally, you probably use like maybe 3, 4, 5 regularly. Every person on Earth, you would probably have like 4 billion people that are online. And all of these use some kind of browser. If you get $1 per user, even if you have like a ridiculously low market share, that could still be a few $1 million. So with a few $1 million, you can actually pay a few developers. Unfortunately, I don't have a deal with Google, at least not yet. That's something I could hope for in the future, but Google is only interested once you actually have users. And that is the problem, that there is no bootstrapping process. Like, how are you going to make a browser without money when you're only going to get paid once you have users? So it's tricky. It's a tricky business to get into. You kind of have to have some kind of a bootstrapping process, and I'm not interested in any kind of investors because they tend to want their money back. So we have zero budget. We have one developer, so that's me. So zero budget, one developer. So we're trying to solve the problem with open source. So my advantage doing this is that I've done it before, right? So I know a lot of the moving parts that are involved, all the bits and pieces that you have to have in place to make a browser today. So maybe we could do something here, but it's pretty much more of a stunt than an actual real plan. It's more of a let's see if we can do it and how far we can get. So this picture, it says, sorry about the street art, but my pony lesson got canceled. And I think, you could say the upside is it's 2020 and a lot of us got a lot more time on our hands, especially me, maybe. But the upside in another way is that it's 2020, and a lot of the things that we had to make from scratch back in 2005, 2007, 2010, that didn't really exist. There are open source projects for now, and many of them much better than what we had back then. So the talk is called Trying to Build an Open Source Browser in 2020. And we've already talked about it a little bit, but I just wanted to recap a little bit about my background. So I'm a trainer and a consultant. I'm a C++ programmer. I've been doing C++ now for 15 years. I've been specializing a lot in application security over the last few years. I work for a company that I co-founded called TurtleSec. We do consulting and training within programming and application security. But previously, I've worked at Opera. Of course, we talked about that. I was also even a Java consultant for a few years. But I worked at Cisco making embedded telepresence systems, which is like video conferencing hardware that you use in meeting rooms. And then I worked at Vivaldi before I started TurtleSec. So I have a master's in computer science, and my pronouns are she, her. But if we go back to this, like my first job, I started on my first browser. Then I did my second while at Cisco, my third at Vivaldi, my fourth while doing TurtleSec. But I kind of made one in between, which is the one that I forked to make the fourth one. So I would say maybe 4.5. I'm not sure. The point is, I clearly have a thing for browsers. And that's kind of weird for a lot of people, because why would you do that? Like, that makes no sense. Why is this the thing that gets you up in the morning? And the thing is, I find it technically challenging. And that's one of the things that I've loved since the beginning, is that I like difficult problems, and I like to solve difficult problems. And a browser contains problems of every kind. If you are into compilers or interpreters, there are compilers and interpreters inside of browsers. If you're interested in low-level platform security, there's stuff in there. If you're interested in printing technology or hardware-accelerated graphics or hardware-accelerated decoding of media or anything you want, it's in a browser, because it's so full of so many types of technology. It's probably one of the most complicated types of projects that exist today, rivaled maybe only by operating systems. So they are definitely not boring. I also like working on something that I use myself. So my first user, my first target user is going to be me. I want to make a browser that I can use every day. It's not there yet, but I hope that it will get there over time, and I will have a browser that I can use. And if I have a browser that I can use, maybe somebody else would want to use it too. So, and that is one of the things that I like. I like having users, and I like having users that have access to me. And that's when I left Cisco. When I was working at Cisco, we were making products that were basically selling B2B. So we're selling it to other businesses, and the people who are using the things that I made, I never saw them. Like I could only meet any of them if we ever did any user testing, but usually I would never meet them, and that felt very distant for me, especially from back when I worked at Opera. I was used to having access to the users, and the users having access to me. And so I joked when I quit Cisco and went to Vivaldi's that I want to work on a product where my users can yell at me on the internet. And so um, that's also something that I really would like. And fourthly, and I think probably becoming increasingly more important, is that I actually believe in the web. I believe in the anarchy of the web, the fact that anyone can publish anything. And that is also, of course, the downside of the web. The web is the concept of the web is pretty radical. And I don't think that we would have ever done it if anybody actually planned it up front properly. Like if you had like a bunch of adults in a room and somebody pitched this idea. I mean, I think the only reason we got away with it is that nobody actually could imagine what it would mean. And I think it gives a foundation for some kind of global freedom that I think we probably need. So yeah, so I'm a little bit idealistic around the web. But we kind of have to look at the browser landscape, because if we want to make a browser, we kind of have to figure out what exists and how do they relate to each other. So outside of Firefox, this is the general landscape of browsers in 2020. And to do that, I have to give you a little bit of a history lesson in browsers. So way back when, in the beginning, KDE needed a browser, so they made Conqueror. It was based on KHTML, and it was a Linux only rendering engine. Later on, though, Apple decided that Apple wanted to make a browser, and they went around looking at what kind of existing engines existed and what were their quality, and they had their own metrics on what they liked and didn't like for making their new browser called Safari. Now, this is a little bit important, because what you see here is that Apple didn't make WebKit from scratch. Apple looked around, tried to figure out what existed already, took the rendering engine that KDE had made, basically forked it, and made WebKit. A little bit later on, so they had this and they called it Chromium, which is a little bit, you have the rendering engine itself, and then you have some stuff outside of it. So this project is today usually referred to as Chromium WebKit. A little bit later, Google wanted to make a browser. They wanted to make Chrome, and they did so by using the existing WebKit project, and they did this for a while. So for quite a considerable long time, both Safari and Chrome were using the same engine, which was open source, which they were cooperating on maintaining. This was a kind of a rocky road, I think, especially for Chrome, because it was basically a project that was managed by Apple, and it became more and more obvious that it was a lot of work for Google to maintain all of the compatibility, to make sure that Safari kept on working, and also the fact that they were kept getting changes into Chrome from Apple that would break things, which made like one of the first like selling points of Chrome was that if you crash a tab, you don't crash the browser. This was also because WebKit was quite unstable inside of Chrome, so they built an architecture around WebKit to make sure that even if WebKit crashed, it wouldn't crash the whole browser. This really influenced the internal architecture in Chrome, and it made a very interesting architecture later on for many kind of security aspects, which I talk about in other talks. But anyway, so what happened was that Google decided that it was too much of a hassle, this cooperation, and they decided to fork this project. So they forked the project and called it Blink. It was still called Chromium, so the Chromium was like the stuff around, and then Blink was like the actual rendering engine. So this project was called Chromium Blink. And at this time, other browsers followed suit. So Opera, which had its own rendering engine up to this point, ditched its own rendering engine and then used Chromium Blink instead to make the new Opera. Vivaldi is also one out of many other browsers like Brave that also did the same. So all of these projects, and now most recently also the new Edge, all of them are using the Chromium Blink engine. Now this is probably the biggest conglomeration of browsers around the same rendering engine that has ever happened before. This whole group of browsers, though, they are based around a browser that is mostly controlled by Google, or the browser engine that is controlled by Google. And it is open source, but it is also quite, it can be a little bit challenging to work with. But so I made a toy browser. So this is I just left Vivaldi, and for some reason I hadn't had enough. And so I was doing a talk at NDC Tech Town, and I wanted to demonstrate something. I was talking about rendering and GPUs and things like that. And I just wanted to demonstrate how the composition inside of Chromium worked. So I made a small toy browser, which was a little bit by accident, which was basically to demonstrate my talk. And so this is a talk. It's called Isolating GPU Access in Its Own Process. And I made it in 2018, and it's on YouTube, so feel free for people who find these things interesting. So I had a slide there where I basically said demo of composition. I might have made a browser. I might have decided to do a demo last night. So 1 o'clock in the morning before my talk, I decided that this would be a great way to demonstrate my point. But I got busy. I had a company, and we had bills to pay. I had clients I needed to work for, and so I kind of left it to one side, and then I was working on building up our company. But so I was doing really well, doing on-prem international trainings in Germany and in the Netherlands and in Norway and in many places, and then March 2020, everything got canceled. Like everything all of my trainings got canceled, all of my conferences got canceled, everything got canceled. Norway was basically on lockdown. Nobody was leaving the country. Nobody was entering any other country. And so I guess I have some time on my hands. So that's when I was like, okay, you know what you do when you have like an idea late at night, right? So you buy a domain name. So that's what I did. So I made Turtle Browser. That was at least the beginning of the Turtle Browser, and so we'll go through that later in the talk. But basically, that's how I ended up doing this. And I think right now would be maybe a good time to see if there are any questions.
Yeah, I actually have just a couple. One, the general one, and one maybe more technical one. So the general one, like as an internet fan, as a web fan, I just have one idea to throw into you. So have you ever think of maybe making a search engine, not the browser?
Yes. But
Maybe
the thing
even
is,
big
I'm
one.
only one person.
Okay, so you selected the browser.
Yeah, no, if I had like unlimited funds, I would basically like hire 200 of like people I admire and I like, and then we would make all the things. And definitely a search engine is one of those things. But I think because I'm just one person, I kind of have to focus because I have limited capacity as a single person. So I'm trying to see how much I can get done just being one person part time. But yeah, it's definitely on my list of things that would be fun to do.
Okay, so we're waiting for the next talk from Patricia regarding the
Oh
search
no.
engine. Okay, like more technical question here. So you said most of the browsers are based on Chrome and WebKit or Chrome and Blink. So what is actual reason for that? So are they that good, or why there are no other options there?
Making a browser engine that supports all of the existing standards and supports all of the weirdness. Nobody has really made one from scratch since the 90s. And that's also one of the things that I think is a little bit sad, is that all of the existing browser engines, a lot of them are have already been phased out. So Opera had its browser engine, and Microsoft had their browser engine, and they have both been phased out. So we are basically stuck in a situation where nobody's making a new browser engine, and we only have we have two. We have, Firefox is working on its thing, and then we have Google working on its thing, and but Google's engine is very much related to Apple's engine because it's a fork from it. So yeah, so it's becoming more and more in a state where Google is dominating browser engines worldwide, and nobody has the money to make a new one. You would need a lot of people and a lot of money, and there's no way to get paid.
Okay, then as a teaser, do you plan to use existing browser engine, or do you plan to implement one in the next hour?
I'm planning on in the first I don't know, few years. I'm planning on using Chrome and Blink. If I get like immensely successful and get lots of money, then I have been thinking about looking at other engines and also trying maybe to make something. But the thing is, it's going to cost a lot of money, so you kind of have to have some kind of income before you can get to that point. So it's going to be Chrome and Blink for any foreseeable future.
Okay, then maybe just very last question on the engine. So from our audience, like, do you know if the Firefox gonna go and move to Chrome engine?
I hope not. I have no such knowledge, and I really hope not. I think it's unhealthy the way that we have it right now. There are very few browser engines, and I know that feels very comfortable for web developers because you don't have to support all of the different quirks. But it also means that there is very little competition, and or the competition is very dominated by Google when it comes to web standards. And so I would really like to have strong, healthy competition between browser engines.
Okay, thank you. I think we can proceed with that.
Okay, so I wanted to make a browser, right? So this is based on a very simple theory. There's this saying that the last 10% of the functionality of any kind of application takes 90% of the time. It's a joke, right? So when you ask the devs, it's like, is it finished? And they go like, yeah, it's practically done. Then it's like there's 90% left. And the reason for that is that the 90% contains all of the details, right? All of the things that all of the tweaking of the UI, all of the little design things, all of the things that turned out wasn't right after all when you put it in front of a user, all of those tests, any kind of server backends, all of the stability and robustness, all of those things that that you realize afterwards that you have to have professional quality. So the idea here is like, if it is the case that the last 10% of functionality is 90% of the time, then the converse of this is that the first 90% of functionality is 10% of the time. Now, so this is the idea that you can basically try to build the basic functionality within each feature as quickly as possible, leaving all of the details until later. And by doing all of these things, you can get a browser together, or any kind of product together, that basically works, but needs lots of work on everything. So this is the plan. So to get this up and running, we need to implement all of these different things. And so the talk is going to be about a lot of the different tech issues and features that you need, and how you can try to make them using open source tools and software. So the idea is skimming the surface. So we're not going to go deep. The idea, and it's super important that you can get this running fast. So there's no time to sit down and like do some kind of deep dive in things. It's like, can you get it up and running really quickly? Because the problem is, I'm one person. I don't have I don't have like, oh, can you go and look at this thing, and can you go and look at this thing? It's only me. There's no parallelization. It's sequential. So if I spend tons of time on one thing, I won't be spending time on something else. Yeah, so no time for depth first. So I need some kind of GUI framework. Now, if you're looking at Chromium, there is a GUI framework inside of Chromium. A lot of browsers use it. I don't like it. So, and I wanted to use a professional GUI toolkit because one of the things that I talked to you before is that previously, like in 2005, when I worked at Opera, we had our own GUI toolkit. We had our own cross-platform GUI toolkit, and that is true for many browsers. And so Chromium also has a built-in GUI toolkit, like many others. It's just because way back when we made this, there wasn't anything that had sufficient quality. Today, I would say that have better things, and so we don't have to be using this. I also need a porting layer because, again, I'm just one person. I don't have time to make a custom custom UI for each platform. It's not going to happen, or a custom porting or platform integration for each platform. I don't have time, so I need to try to use and leverage what exists. So some things you might be getting from the C++ standard library, where you have lots of things that are cross-platform, but we will need much more than that, right? So for this, the porting layer, I'm hoping to support these initial platforms. So I want Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. So basically, I'm targeting in this first version for desktop. I hope to do mobile too eventually, but again, I want to finish this first so that I don't spread myself too thin. So we're going to be focusing on this, but also keeping in mind that we want to go mobile later. I want to use Qt, and Qt is C++, but it also has QML, and I really like QML for making UI. So I'm going to show you what QML looks like if you're not familiar with it, but it is a Qt-specific UI markup language, and it is very high quality. Lots of really professional things are made with it, probably things that you own that use it. And it is extremely comfortable to work in. So the idea here is that we're going to be keeping all of the business logic of a browser in C++, and that we're going to be using QML for the UI. To have that separation cleanly is one thing that I've learned from doing this many times, is that you really want to be able to change the UI easily. And when all of these things are mixed together, that becomes very difficult. So trying to keep all of the business logic down in C++, you are much freer to change the UI as you see fit. So what does QML actually look like? This is what I say. It's weird. It's like, imagine if JSON, JavaScript, and CSS had a baby, and that's what it looks like. But it does. And so let's have a look. So this is a simplified version of a file I have in the project. So here you see the file is called webpage.qml. That defines a web page component, and that web page component can be used other places. And so this is a simplified version of my file. And up here we have some import statements where we can import other modules into this one. We can import JavaScript files that we have. Then you have here is like the address bar. So this is the one with the back, forward, reload button, those kinds of things, and the address field. And then that is a custom component that I made. So I have another file then called addressbar.qml, which defines the look and the buttons and things that are in this. And then we have the web engine view, which is where like the internet will be. So if you look at your browser, that would basically, the address bar is like the bar with the URL field in it. And then the web engine view is the entire like square underneath where you have your web page. I can actually show you. So if we go, okay, so this is Turtle browser. It's very simple. We'll get into the reason why it's very simple. But here you have up here you have the whole address bar. You have a little like a drop downy thing here. It's very small. Then you have like a reload button, back and forwards button. You have, and then under here you have the web view, where here you can play music videos on YouTube. Okay, so basically this is what QML looks like. So the advantage of QML is, and this is, I can't stress this enough. If you do hard code your UI in C++ or in other types of imperative languages, it is very often extremely hard to do significant changes without spending a lot of time making it look good again. And this is much easier in QML. I know from experience of doing both. So the desktop web view, so where we actually have the internet, we have to decide which engine to use. Now, I've kind of given that away already, that we're going to go for Chromium Blink. Now, this is because that is the most used engine in the world, and so I can base myself on other people's hard work, which is the whole idea of the open source component of this project. And it comes with Qt. So Qt has a built-in component called Qt Web Engine, which uses Chromium Blink. Now, this will become a little bit more complicated later on in the talk, but the basic bones of it is here. So this is what I'm using in, let's see. Here, so this is Chromium Blink that renders the web page and everything here. Okay. So build system. So many places that I worked in C++, we've had our own custom build systems. And this was true at Opera. It was true at Cisco. It was true to a certain extent at Vivaldi, because Chromium has its own build system. I think it's on the second or third iteration of creating a brand new build system. But for me, I want to use something that has better Googleability and is more easily applied. So I'm going to be using Cmake as my meta build system. So if for those people who are not familiar with Cmake, I can show you a little bit what it looks like. So Cmake is it's not like the prettiest thing in the world, but it does the job. It is very mature at this time. And what it basically does is that it generates a platform build files. So you define your Cmake project and it will generate the platform build files for each system. So you can choose whichever backend you want. So this is sort of like a compiler front end. This is sort of like a build system front end. The nice thing is that I can, most of my Cmake files, they just work on every platform. I don't have to worry about it. And that is one of the primary features here. I don't want to re-implement everything for each platform. So Cmake does the job. If you struggle with Cmake and you sometimes want to cry, there is an absolutely fantastic book called A Professional Cmake, which you need, trust me. And go get it, and then you will not cry as much anymore. Anyway, it's only available digitally, so I'm thinking I'm just going to print it myself so I can have it like in physical form. It's probably one of the best books written in C++ space for like 10 years. Anyway, dependency management. Because this is also something that most places I've worked is something that you've had you've done it for each platform, or you rolled your own kind of cross-platform dependency management system, or you can always do what Chromium has done for a bunch of projects and just fork all of them. So if you go and you look inside of the Chromium source code tree, it's just filled with open source projects. So they forked a whole bunch of them, and then they have to maintain them over time. But they do that because then they can also maintain their own set of patches, and they can make sure that this works on all platforms, and it's their way of maintaining some control. But this is not going to work for me. I don't have time for that. So I'm going to be using Conan. So today I would say probably the community is split between Conan and VC Package. For me, I like Conan because it's very configurable. VC Package is probably easier. I'm not sure, but I like Conan, so that's what I went for. Also, it has the wonderful feature of having a package called Conan Qt. Because building Qt is also not trivial. It is a very big project. It is sometimes quite challenging to set up correctly. And so having somebody else manage that problem is really nice. The project is maintained by Eric Lemancier. And one of the absolute features of it is that he is super nice. And he took all my bug reports on Twitter DM. So, which I'm really shy. I don't like to report issues on other people's projects. So I have a tendency to like DM them or send them an email, which is really weird, but I'm just like that. And he would take all of my reports on Twitter DM. So that was awesome. And one of the things that it does, and which is absolutely critical for me, is that you can configure. Where did you go? I was sure I had it up here somewhere. Okay, just give me a second here. Okay, so you can configure which modules you want to have in it. So here I've set that I want Qt location, I want Qt quick controls and quick controls too. And here we have Qt Web Engine. Here you can also do like pass certain flags. So I will say like with font config, with free type. You can set, and this is one of the things that I really like about Conan, is that you can set specific flags for everything. Now, one of the downsides of this for anyone who, well, we'll get to in a little bit, but building Chromium, although, I've tried to set it up so it will just build and get you what you need, it still takes a lot of time. So we'll get back to that in a little bit. In the concept of it's 2020, right? So we want some kind of continuous integration system. We're way too old not to be doing this. Now, the thing is, I don't have any servers for this. I probably want some servers for this, but I don't. And the code goes with the whole no money, right? So the whole idea of this project is to see how far you can get with no money, or practically no money. So we're going to be using GitHub Actions for all the things. So if we go back here, you can have a look. So we have the YAML file for a GitHub action. For all of you, okay, I'll show you actually. Let's go here. So if we go here, you have on GitHub, you have this action thing, and then you have, it will run it on, depending on, so it will run different types of actions. I have a bunch of different actions. So here is like the typical CI/CD thing I push to GitHub type of thing. On every push and on every pull request, this action will run. It will run on Ubuntu, macOS, and Windows. And it is quite nice. We'll be looking a little bit more into some of the features of this, but GitHub Actions is quite nice. One of the biggest features of GitHub Actions, because I did look at other systems for CI/CD that for free and open source kind of projects, and every step in a GitHub action for open source project, every step that it runs can run up to 6 hours. Now you go like, why do you need 6 hours? And I'm like, seriously, it's not enough. It's not enough. I can barely, on a good day, be able to build Chromium on Linux. Never on Windows anymore. On Mac, it's pretty good. And this is also one of the features of GitHub Actions. If you build on Mac, they will build on Mac hardware, which means that you can actually do legal builds without having Mac hardware yourself, which unfortunately I don't yet. Although I have a really nice person who's wanting to donate some Mac Minis to me, so I have to go pick them up. Okay, so let's go back here. Okay, so GitHub Actions. We're going to use GitHub Actions for all the things. But the problem is, again, like you don't want to build all of Chromium every time, because we have tweaked the modules in Conan, and I have not paid for Artifactory because it's not in my free idea here. And if you want to use Conan and you definitely want to go look at Artifactory for managing your packages. But I don't, so I made this this little hack. So this is me sitting around. This is very typical of me. I have this problem that I don't want to build all of Chromium every time somebody pushes to master on my browser. So I want to save the build from last time, but Google, GitHub Action wipes everything and starts from scratch. So I want to cache it. Now, Conan has a built-in cache. It's called .conan. It's a folder. You can put it anywhere. You can point the environment variable to where it is. But there's not really a way of getting that into your action. There is a built-in cache in GitHub Actions. So there is something called here Actions cache. You can use it, point it at anything you would like. So you can point it at your node modules or whatever, try to speed up your builds. The thing is, it doesn't always work. It often fails. It only caches for so long, like for a week. and lots of things like that, which means it fails quite often. And the moment it fails, you're building for 6 hours and oftentimes timing out every 6 hours. So that's not going to work. So basically, I made Conan Cash, which is a GitHub action. You can use it. It's on the marketplace. And it basically caches the .conan folder. So, and the way it does it is it checks it in into a GitHub repository. So basically, I just take my whole entire .conan folder and I push it to GitHub. It's not really what GitHub intended us to do, but it works. Now, for some of your larger files, and this is like if you use this in your regular project, this is probably not going to be an issue. But for any kind of my shared libraries, they're too big. Like you hit the maximum limit of file size for GitHub. But then GitHub has something called GitHub LFS, which you can use. And it is free up to a certain like upload download. And then you can pay a little bit, like you can pay a $5 a month or something, and they will give you more. So when I first started this, I wanted something that worked on all platforms. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to use because you have two types of GitHub actions. You can use a Docker action, or you can use JavaScript actions. So you make it in JavaScript, you make it in Docker. So I was like, totally doing this in Docker. This is like a no-brainer. You run Docker on Windows and Mac and Linux. It's awesome. I just write once and run everywhere, right? Unfortunately, it turns out that Docker actions in GitHub Actions are Linux only. So they only work on Linux, which was not going to work for me. And I was very, very sad. But then I found a really nice hack. So if this is a problem you have, give me a second. Let's see here. Basically, you can call a shell script from JavaScript. So that's what I do. So I basically have a JavaScript in my GitHub action, and all it does is calls a shell script. So I made practically no changes in my Docker action. I just introduced these wrapper JavaScript things to call my shell script. So it's basically a lot of shell script. It probably says so right here somewhere. If you go here, it's like shell script 74.4%. So a lot of shell script. Okay, so that's a tip for you if this is something that you want to do. You want to use GitHub Actions for things. Go for like a JavaScript action with shell script, and it runs on every platform. So then you can have the same action on Windows, Mac, and Linux, which is a must for me. Yeah. Okay, so when it comes to testing, I need a way to test the QML. So I need some kind of way to drive the UI, and I need a way to test C++. And maybe some way to drive this from outside to be able to like click through things and make sure things behave the way they should. I haven't really gotten anywhere with this yet. So this is still on my to-do list. Licensing. So this is probably was my biggest first feature next to tabs because I need to be compliant to all of these licenses. So making open source things comes with a lot of legal obligations. And so there are going to be lots of licenses. And so Chromium comes with like a zillion licenses that you have to deal with, all sorts of third-party libraries. And Qt comes with a lot themselves. Now, the licenses that are included in Chromium, they're all pretty safe because Google is very conservative when it comes to what kind of open source licenses that they allow. Qt has its own licensing. That is the issue, and it can get tricky to maneuver, and so that is going to be like one of the issues. I don't have any money; I can't give any money to Qt, so I have to be able to maneuver their licensing. Yeah, no money. So basically, my current system is very simple, and it probably needs definitely several iterations, making it more professional. But currently, I use Conan to collect all sorts of licensing files. So I'm using Conan for all of my dependencies and my transitive dependencies, and then I use Conan to try to grab up all of the license files or licensee things. This probably needs more professional work. This is not enough for it to work professionally. But for my first 90%, it's fine. I use then so when Conan has collected all these licenses, and it puts them in a folder, I stuff all of that inside of a QRC. So this is like a binary thing that is included into your executable, which is really nice because then I don't have to deal with files because that becomes platform specific issues again. Then I need some UI to display them because that is a part of the license that you have to be able to show the license to people. This really depends on which license, but I'm not going to make that distinction. So, because that just makes it complicated. So we're just going to go for showing all the licenses. And so I made this wonderful UI. So here you have like all of the licenses and the top level folders, and you can look at what is inside of Chromium or Qt or other, which is outside of that. Now this isn't so easy to maneuver, but like if we try to say, okay, so you can search for names here. So let's go for like HAP, no, nothing. Okay, so go for NI, nice try. But then you can also search for like, okay, BSD. Okay, so what do I have here? And I'm going to make this a little bit more probably searching inside. Oh yeah, I forgot to show you. Let's see. Okay, let's do nice again. So, and then you can click on it and we'll display it and you can read the license file. So that was the first implementation of trying to be compliant with the licenses. Okay, so that's the GUI to display it. But also you have to monitor it because I'm going to be taking in new Qt versions. I'm going to be taking in new Chromium versions. I'm going to do it regularly, especially Chromium. I'm going to be taking Chromium maybe every month or every month and a half. Qt maybe a couple of times a year, and also patches. And so I have to monitor this over time. And currently I don't have any system for this, but I have to have something to run through and check that I'm not including a license that I can't support. Okay, so what is my minimal viable product? Like, what do I need to be able to have like a usable browser? It doesn't have to be great, but it can it can be usable. I need to have a web view. Now I sort of kind of have that right now. I need to have tabs, and I sort of kind of have that. I need shortcuts. Currently, I don't have a lot of shortcuts. But I do have like Control T for making new tabs, Control W for like closing tabs. But I don't really have a lot of shortcuts. So I need some shortcuts, especially like I need a few of those to do some interesting things that make it usable for me. I need multiple windows. I need to be able to do Control N and get a new window. That works currently, but I don't want to do it because it messes up my layout here. But you can. So you have to have some way of creating multiple browser windows. You need to be able to build and test, and currently it's more building than testing. So that needs to. I need some way to update the Webview. So I need the Webview to update on regular intervals. This is going to be an issue, and we're going to look at that. And then we need packaging for each of the platforms. Now here I'm going for Cmake, and I think I'll show you that in a little bit. And then of course licenses. So let's do packaging. This is a place where I've only gotten like a little bit, and I need more. So I'm going to try to use Cmake. So Cmake is sort of like the unknown little brother of Cmake. So if we go up here, I do have some stuff here in like this packaging directory that so it integrates into Cmake. There are cross-platform things that you can set up. Qt also comes with an installer framework, so I can make hopefully installers for Windows and Mac. For Ubuntu or for Linux, you have stuff for making deb files and for RPM files and things like that. So that's something. But currently, I mean, what is here, it barely works, but it doesn't really produce a functional package. So it's definitely one of the first things I need to fix. I need to have proper packages on all platforms. Yeah, I need a website. Okay, so I told you in the beginning, right? So I did buy a website. Actually, we can open it here. Like, okay, turtlebrowser.com. It says hello world. Okay, so that's as far as I've gotten with that. So I need a website. I'm probably going to use GitHub Pages because why not? Like GitHub, all the things. And just a Jekyll theme and just having like a download button, a green download button.
Yeah, Patricia, sorry for just a
Yeah.
very quick interrupt. I will drive for just a minute. We have 15 minutes left, even a little bit less. So that's just some information for you. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. So releases haven't gotten really far there. So I'm thinking probably GitHub releases. So the big green button is going to link to GitHub releases. That's the plan. So to get a more functional browser, you need lots of UI. You need lots of integration into the UI, and I don't have these things. So here you have like some things that are super needed, like certificate UI, or super useful that I need to use it. It's like find in page or tab cycling. But these are things that needs to be done to integrate properly with the web page. So for any kind of alpha release where you actually have like real users, you have to be able to update the web view properly. Have it localized, proper styling, things like that, accessibility, custom shortcuts, because people are going to die if they can't set custom shortcuts. And then sessions, dev tools, and downloads. And this, I think, it can give you like a bare bones functional browser that you can use normally. And for UI styling, Qt has a system for making custom styles where you can actually have pictures of each of your components. And this is going to be especially important, I think, for the tab bar to make like a little bit of a rounded corner and make that normal tab kind of look and feel and make it prettier. So that is like the run through of like the different kinds of text for different kinds of parts here. So I think this is a good place to ask if anybody has any questions.
The questions. Yeah, let's keep them and go forward, and then we'll handle some questions in
the questions at the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so updating Chromium is going to be a big issue. So Qt has designed it in a way where they basically release Chromium inside of Qt twice a year. And that's because Qt has twice a year releases, and that freezes Chromium at that time. But the problem is that this doesn't really fit with how Chromium does things. So at the start of 2020, Qt released Qt 5.14 with Chromium 77. But Chromium 77 had been released in like the summer of 2019. So it was already like 6 months old. When Qt 5.15 came out, it came out with Chromium 80, which was released just before Christmas in 2019. And that means at this time, in Qt 5.15, we're sitting with a Chromium release that is about 1 year old. The problem is also that in Qt 6, they're not releasing Qt Web Engine, which means that Qt Web Engine probably won't be released until next spring. And that means the Chromium version will be 1.5 years old. So this is an issue. It's not going to work. We need to be able to follow the Chromium releases, which means we have to disjoint the Qt web engine from Qt. We can't be following Qt releases for the Qt web engine, so these have to be in different paces. So this is going to be a massive work just to be able to set this up. But if we're going to make a browser, we're not going to play making a browser. We're going to make a browser for real. And then we actually have to have web engine updates. So we need to be able to do all of the releases. Every time there's a Chromium release, we need to follow it. So where Vivaldi and Chrome are now, they're around 86, probably moving to 87, 88, that in that direction. Whereas I'm still sitting on Chromium 80. Yeah. There's also the issue with security, right? Because Qt has turned off sandboxing, at least on Windows, I think. And this is a massive amount of platform code that exists inside of Chromium. And it needs to be on all platforms for me to release a browser that is as safe as I can make it, at least. The process architecture inside of Qt when it comes to using Chromium is different than the process architecture that Chromium is designed for, and this is also going to be an issue. Then we come to proprietary media, and these are codecs for decoding like video and audio and things like that. So all kinds of free codecs they come inside of Chromium. Chromium has a built-in FFmpeg fork that you can use for all your free codec use. But for any kind of non-free codecs, and that is surprisingly a lot used, like all of your GIFs are probably H.264, which is proprietary codec, and I can't ship it because the license fees are massive. So I have to find some other way of decoding these things. And then we come finally to like some kind of beta release. And then we need like crash reporting, printing, all sorts of all of these things that we suddenly need, like things like auto update, right? And the thing is with these things, then you suddenly need some kind of backend, like auto update, crash reporting. We need some kind of server that the browser can communicate with. Crash reporting, the plan is to use Sentry. And this is like, we made at Opera, we made our own crash reporting system. But Sentry seems to be much better, and so the plan is to integrate with Sentry from Qt, and this seems to be something that several people have done before. So I hope it's going to be relatively straightforward. The idea is that you have some kind of Sentry server that will do your deduplication, your create your stack traces, and maybe even do your issue reporting. So creating issues in your Jira or whatever you use. And so all of your browsers will then be reporting their crashes to the server, and then that will hopefully be deduplicated and create some kind of issue. Of course, right now, I don't really have an issue database. I have you can make issues on GitHub. So the question is, could I make issues on GitHub? Probably. There's an API, so maybe. But in the end, I do want to make a mobile application too, and that there I'm looking at embedding platform Webview, so not building it myself. For many reasons, but mostly because Qt does not support Qt Web Engine on embedded or on mobile platforms. But they do have something called Qt Webview, which will embed the platform Webview, and so that is what I'm planning to use there. You need a lot of different things that are specific to mobile, and so that's going to be a whole other ball of wax. So here we are in November 2020. This pandemic has been going on for quite a while. Most of us have adjusted in different ways. Like I'm doing online training now. I didn't do that before. But it doesn't really change what I want to do, but it does. I still need to get paid. So it becomes, it is definitely a side project, but working for myself means I can take some time on occasion to work on this and bring it a little bit further. So if we want to round it up, making a browser is not a one-person job. You need a lot of people if you're going to do this for real. Just keeping up with Chromium releases is a full-time / part-time job. It's non-trivial for a single person. So then now you're only keeping up with Chromium releases. You're not making any features. So that's going to be an issue. But you can get pretty far with just one person, and that's kind of what we've seen. Even if you're just one person, you got little or no money, you can do this. And the reason for that is that we have open source, right? Lots of people have donated their work to the rest of us, but we don't have a way to pay them. And that is a problem that we have today. The system for paying for open source is totally broken fundamentally, and we need a way to fix that. So people say like, oh yeah, you should get a patron or GitHub sponsor. But the thing is today, if you're going to pay engineers, they need serious money, like not side project money. They need salaries. And for that, you need something more. So if you have zero budget, one dev, and a whole lot of open source, you can kind of make a browser. And it kind of works. So that was my talk. And now I do have a few minutes for questions.
Yeah, we have like a couple of minutes maybe to discuss the technological stack, which is very interesting, I would say. I would ask you here about other alternatives to the technologies you were using here. Like, for example, maybe you can briefly compare Conan and VC package and talk about like why in most applications where the people are looking for some UI when in C++, they're thinking only about Qt and QML. I'm not sure, like maybe that's the state of the deals. If there are any other alternatives here, or that's how we live in C++ world, only with Qt for UI.
Well, there are other options like GTK is used, but GTK is basically like C with like emulation of C++. So I've never been a big fan of how it looks. Like just coding in GTK, I don't like it. Some people do, and more power to them. When it comes to making professional looking UIs, there's little for desktop and especially cross-platform UIs. Like if you are going to make like just something for Mac or just for Windows, then there are lots of options. But if you want to make cross-platform UIs, Qt is probably the best there is today. Yeah. When it comes to Conan and VC package, VC package is more like a Git repo.
Show us.
If you want to update one dependency, so let's say that you have a feature that you need that is in one of your dependencies, so you want to update that one package. Let's call it package Y, but you want to keep everything else the same. Then that's probably not possible, because if you want to update package Y, it's going to put you to a brand new tag of all of your dependencies, which is probably going to change the versions of a ton of other dependencies. And that might not be something that is viable for you. So that is sort of what I like about Conan, is that you do have the option to choose the versions that you want for all of your dependencies. Of course, it becomes more of your problem to make sure that all of these things play well together. Conan helps a lot, but it is, so I would say if you don't want to think about your dependencies, then probably VC package is simpler. But if you do have to maintain it over time, it might be easier to maintain with Conan. So it's
Okay,
depends.
thank you. Yeah, maybe last question just from the chat is, the question was like, maybe I missed that part, but how do you plan to deliver new browser versions?
Yeah, so that is the auto update thing. I think I went through it very quickly. But basically, you have to have a way to push new releases, and how this is done has changed a lot over time. On Linux platforms, right now the normal thing is to go through the normal Linux update mechanisms. So for like apt update, apt upgrade kind of thing on Ubuntu. For Windows and Mac, it's more normal for the applications to update themselves. So they have to check with a server on regular intervals, check what kind of version do I have. Are there any newer versions? Then show some kind of UI saying, do you want to update to this newer version? And
Okay.
so that's yeah.
Thanks, Patricia. We are running out of time. I think it's 15 seconds left until the next block. So it was really fascinating talk, inspiring to write my own browser someday. So thank you so much.